A dusty chessboard sat in the forgotten corner of a five-star restaurant's private lounge. For billionaire Marcus Sterling, it was a momentary distraction, a toy to amuse himself with when business grew tedious. For Elena Cross, the waitress refilling his water glass with trembling hands, it was a ghost that refused to stay buried. He saw a servant in a cheap uniform, someone beneath his notice, invisible as the air she breathed. She saw a battlefield she had abandoned 16 years ago, leaving behind bodies and dreams and the only father she had ever known. When he arrogantly challenged her to a game for his entertainment, he had no idea he was not just moving wooden pieces across 64 squares. He was challenging a phantom, a forgotten genius who had spent years learning to be invisible. He was risking an empire he had built on seeing people as tools rather than souls, and he was about to learn the hardest lesson of his privileged life. The morning began the way all of Elena's mornings began, in the pre-dawn darkness of Seattle Medical Center's fourth-floor oncology ward. At 5:30, when most of the city still slept beneath their warm blankets, she was already pushing through the heavy double doors that separated the healthy world from the one where people fought invisible battles inside their own bodies. The fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that made even the healthiest person look half dead. Elena had learned to ignore it, the same way she had learned to ignore the antiseptic smell that clung to her clothes long after she left, the same way she had learned to smile when her heart was breaking. Room 417. She knew the number by heart, could walk to it with her eyes closed, had memorized every crack in the linoleum floor between the elevator and the door. Ryan Cross, 25 years old, sat propped up against pillows that were too thin to be comfortable, his laptop balanced on his knees despite the IV line running into his left arm. He looked up when she entered, and his face transformed. That smile, the one that had survived everything life had thrown at them, lit up the dim room like sunrise. "You look exhausted, Elena." His voice was softer than it used to be, worn down by treatments and medications, but still holding that note of concern that made him sound older than his years. "When did you last sleep?" "Sleep is overrated." She set down the thermos of homemade soup she had brought, checking the temperature of his room with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "You are improving. That is what matters." Ryan closed his laptop, giving her his full attention in that way that always made her chest tight. He was too thin, his cheekbones too sharp, his eyes too large in his pale face. But he was alive. He was here. He was hers to protect. The doctor said another 3 months, maybe 4. The experimental treatment in Switzerland could change everything, could give him decades instead of months, could give him the life he deserved. $180,000. The number lived in her mind like a second heartbeat, constant and unavoidable. "I got the new college brochure yesterday." Ryan held it up for her to see. University of Washington, printed across the front in bold purple letters. Marine biology. "They have an amazing program. I know I am older than most incoming students, but maybe next year, if the treatment works." Elena felt something crack inside her chest, a hairline fracture in the armor she wore every day. When the treatment works. Not if. When? She reached out and touched his hand, careful to avoid the IV line, feeling the bones too close to the surface of his skin. "You will go. I promise you will go." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of silence that only exists between people who have survived impossible things together. Ryan had been just 16 years old when they immigrated to America, old enough to remember Bucharest, but young enough to adapt. Old enough to understand why his sister had changed her name and refused to touch a chess piece ever again, but young enough not to ask too many questions. He only knew that she worked 3 jobs to keep him alive, that she never complained, that she smiled even when he could see the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. "Hey, Elena, want to hear a joke?" Ryan's eyes sparkled with mischief despite the pallor of his skin. "Why did the chess piece go to therapy?" Elena played along, grateful for his attempt to lighten the mood. "I do not know. Why?" "Because it had too many issues." Ryan grinned at his own terrible pun, and Elena forced a laugh that came out more genuine than she expected. He was always doing this, always trying to take care of her even when he was the one lying in a hospital bed, always trying to make her smile. The door opened and Dr. Sarah Chen entered, her expression carefully neutral in that way doctors had when they were about to deliver news that required careful handling. Miss Cross. She nodded in greeting, pulling up Ryan's chart on the tablet she carried. We got the latest test results back. Elena stood immediately, her body tense with anticipation and dread in equal measure. And? His levels are stable. That is good. Dr. Chen's pause lasted a fraction too long, but without the specialized treatment, we are looking at a window of 3 to 4 months before we see significant decline. The clinic in Zurich is still holding the spot, but they need confirmation and 50% deposit within 12 weeks. 3 months. Elena's mind performed the mathematics instantly, the way it always did, seeing patterns and probabilities without conscious effort. Her 3 jobs combined brought in about $4,500 a month after taxes. Rent was $1,800. Food, utilities, Ryan's current medications, her own minimal expenses. She could save perhaps $2,000 a month if she stopped eating anything beyond rice and beans, if she worked every single shift available, if nothing unexpected happened. In 3 months, that was $6,000. It was nowhere close to $90,000, let alone the full $180,000 they would eventually need. We will make it work, she said, because what else could she say? Thank you, doctor. After Dr. Chen left, Ryan reached for Elena's hand. I heard, about the money. Do not worry about money, that is my job. Elena, you already work yourself to exhaustion. His voice cracked slightly. You gave up everything for me. Your chess career, your dreams, everything. You are not my burden, Ryan. Elena sat on the edge of his bed, looking directly into his eyes so he would believe her. You are my reason. After Victor died, I was broken, lost. Raising you, protecting you, that saved me. You gave me purpose when I had none. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. I just wish it did not cost you so much. Elena touched his face gently, the way their mother used to before she died, bringing him into the world, before their father disappeared into his grief, and then into nothing at all. It costs me nothing. You are worth everything. They sat together until the nurse came for Ryan's morning medications, until Elena had to leave to make it to her first shift of the day. As she walked down the corridor toward the elevator, she did not allow herself to cry until she was safely inside the stairwell where no one could see. 3 months, $90,000 up front. Impossible numbers that had to become possible because the alternative was unthinkable. The locker room at the Meridian Hotel smelled of industrial cleaning products and the faint perfume of 100 different women who had changed into their uniforms in this space. Elena stood before the narrow mirror, watching herself transform. She pulled her dark hair back into a tight bun, every strand controlled and perfect. She buttoned the starched black dress with its crisp white apron, the uniform that turned her into a ghost, into someone who could move through the world of the wealthy without disturbing their perfect illusions. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the girl who had once sat across from Russian grandmasters, who had once been called the Phantom of Bucharest, who had once believed the whole world was open to her if she was brave enough to reach for it. Invisible is safe, she reminded herself. Invisible pays bills. Invisible keeps Ryan alive. But in the reflection, behind her own dark eyes, she could still see that other girl sometimes. The one who had loved chess with a passion that bordered on obsession, who had seen the 64 squares as a universe of infinite possibility, who had believed that brilliance could overcome any obstacle. That girl had died in a tournament hall in Budapest 16 years ago, crushed under the weight of a single mistake and the heart attack that killed the only person who had ever truly seen her. The door swung open and Maria Gonzalez entered, her weathered face breaking into a warm smile. Misha, you are here again. This is your 6th day in a row. Hey. Maria was 55 years old and had been working at the Meridian for 20 years, long enough to have earned a kind of maternal authority among the younger staff. She moved with the efficiency of someone who knew every corner of the hotel, every preference of the regular guests, every mood of the tyrannical manager. Her hands were marked with the evidence of decades of service, calluses, and small scars that spoke of hard work and harder choices. I need the hours. Elena returned to adjusting her uniform, making sure every detail was perfect. Mr. Peterson does not tolerate any excuse. Maria studied her for a moment, and Elena could feel the weight of that gaze. You have good hands, strong fingers. Like artist or musician, what did you do before this? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with genuine curiosity and something else, something that felt almost like recognition. Elena's hands were distinctive, she knew. The calluses on her fingertips had faded over 16 years, but the shape of her fingers remained, long and elegant, trained from childhood to move across a chessboard with precision and grace. Nothing important, Elena deflected, her voice light and final. Just surviving, like you. Maria reached out and squeezed her shoulder, a brief gesture of solidarity. We all have stories we do not tell, Mija. But someday, maybe you trust me with yours. Before Elena could respond, the overhead speaker crackled to life. All front-of-house staff to positions. Sterling Technologies CEO dining in the Vivian Room tonight. Big spender, no mistakes. Maria's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing slightly. Marcus Sterling, be careful with that one. Rich men like him, they think the world exists to entertain them. Elena nodded, gathering her order pad and pen, pushing aside the strange flutter of anxiety in her chest. She did not know why the announcement made her nervous. She had served countless wealthy men, had perfected the art of being present but invisible, attentive but forgettable. This would be no different. Just another shift, just another step toward the impossible goal of saving her brother's life. The Vivian Room at the Meridian Hotel existed in a different dimension than the rest of the world. Here, silence was a luxury sold by the ounce. The clinking of platinum cutlery against bone china was muted. The conversations were hushed, as if the very air had been trained not to carry voices too far. The lighting was calculated to perfection, warm enough to flatter expensive skincare routines, but bright enough to properly display the carefully plated food. This was where power dined, where deals worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime were made over $2,400 bottles of wine. Elena moved through this world like water, flowing around obstacles, filling spaces without calling attention to herself. She knew where to stand to be available without hovering, how to pour wine without making a sound, how to read the invisible signals that meant someone needed something before they had to ask. It was a different kind of genius than chess, but genius nonetheless. She did not notice him at first. Table 7 was occupied by a group of 3, all dressed in the uniform of corporate power, all radiating the particular kind of confidence that came from having more money than most small countries. But then one of them spoke, and something in his voice made her fingers tighten on the water pitcher she carried. The acquisition of Cyberdyne is not a negotiation. His voice was cold, precise, each word delivered like a chess move. It is a forced capture. We surround their queen and the rest of the board collapses. Elena's breath caught. Chess metaphors. She had not heard anyone speak about business in chess terms in years, had trained herself not to hear that language, not to let it pull her back into memories she had buried. But this man spoke it fluently, casually, as if the 64 squares were the natural lens through which to view every interaction. She forced herself to approach the table, her practiced smile in place, her eyes carefully trained on a point just past their shoulders. Would you care for another bottle of the Chateau Margaux, Mr. Sterling? Just water. Marcus Sterling did not look at her, his attention focused on the 2 executives flanking him. He gestured dismissively at his glass, already lost in the trajectory of his thoughts. Sarah, stick to the numbers. Strategy is my domain. The woman to his left, impeccably dressed with sharp eyes that held a flicker of something that might have been resentment, pressed her lips together but said nothing. The man on the right, David Chen according to the reservation, laughed a little too loudly at something that was not quite a joke. Elena moved quietly, refilling the water glasses with the precision of long practice. But as she reached for Marcus Sterling's glass, her eyes betrayed her. They drifted past his shoulder to a small forgotten sitting area within the alcove. There, on a low mahogany table untouched by the waitstaff, sat an old Staunton chessboard. The wood was dark and rich, walnut and maple aged to a deep patina that spoke of decades of use. The pieces were elegantly carved, ivory and ebony frozen in mid-game, as if the players had simply vanished decades ago, leaving their battle suspended in time. A fine layer of dust coated the surface, turning the black squares gray, muting the white squares to cream. The world tilted. Elena's hand trembled, water sloshing dangerously close to the rim of the pitcher. The Vivian room disappeared, and she was 15 years old, sitting in the Budapest tournament hall, the weight of the world on her shoulders and the smooth, cool ivory of a night in her palm. She could hear the crowd holding its breath. She could feel Victor's eyes on her from across the room. She could see the board, see the patterns, see the fatal mistake she was about to make. "Are you all right?" The question came from Sarah Mitchell, the woman whose strategic opinions Marcus Sterling had just dismissed, and it was edged with genuine concern. "Yes, I apologize." Elena blinked hard, forcing herself back into the present, into this body, into this life. The water pitcher was steady again, her hands once more under her control. But Marcus Sterling had noticed. His predator's instincts had registered her moment of vulnerability, had seen the direction of her glance. He turned in his chair, following her gaze to the forgotten chessboard. A slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse before the game begins. "You play?" His voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a knife. Elena froze. For a heartbeat, she was not a waitress anymore. She was a girl sitting opposite a Russian grandmaster, the tournament hall electric with possibility. She was the Phantom, the prodigy who saw patterns no one else could see, who played with a creativity that bordered on the supernatural. The room tilted, and she could hear Victor's voice, thick with his Russian accent, rough with pride and love. "The board does not lie, Detka. It shows you who you are." Then reality crashed back. She was Elena Cross, waitress, caregiver, survivor. The Phantom had died 16 years ago in a hospital corridor in Moscow, crushed under the weight of grief and guilt. "Sir?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Marcus gestured toward the chessboard with his chin. "The game of kings. Do you play?" There was a mocking glint in his eyes, the particular kind of amusement wealthy people got when they encountered something unexpected in someone they considered beneath them. He was bored. The business discussion was all but done. His subordinates were predictable. The wine was losing its charm. He wanted entertainment, a distraction, and she had accidentally presented herself as an option. A little. Elena wanted nothing more than to retreat, to disappear into the kitchen, to be invisible again. A long time ago. Perfect. Marcus stood up with the fluid confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. He walked over to the chessboard and wiped the dust off one corner with his napkin, his movements casual and proprietary. "Let's have a game. It is dreadfully dull in here." David and Sarah exchanged glances, amusement flickering across their faces. Marcus Sterling, titan of industry, playing chess with a waitress. It was absurd, comical, the kind of story they would tell at cocktail parties to illustrate his eccentric brilliance. "Sir, I could not possibly." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "I am working." Mr. Peterson, the hotel's manager, had been hovering nervously near the entrance to the alcove, monitoring the VIP table with the anxious attention of someone whose entire livelihood depended on keeping people like Marcus Sterling happy. He scurried over now, his face already arranged in an expression of professional concern. "Is there a problem, Mr. Sterling?" "No problem at all, Peterson." Marcus did not take his eyes off Elena, and there was something in that gaze that made her skin prickle. "Your employee and I are about to engage in a friendly match, a bit of sport to liven up the evening." Mr. Peterson blanched. "But she is on duty. It is highly irregular." Marcus Sterling's smile vanished as if it had never existed. "Are you telling me no?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threat. Marcus Sterling was not simply a wealthy guest. Sterling Technologies had accounts with the Meridian that funded Mr. Peterson's salary, that kept the lights on, that determined whether he kept his job or joined the ranks of the unemployed. This was not a question. It was a test, and there was only one acceptable answer. Mr. Peterson's spine dissolved. He turned to Elena, his expression a frantic mixture of pleading and command. "Do as Mr. Sterling says, Cross. Do not cause any trouble." Elena felt the walls closing in. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to make an excuse, to feign sudden illness, to do anything except sit down at that board. She had built a life on avoiding this, on never touching the pieces, on never letting the patterns back into her mind. Chess had cost her everything, had killed the only father she had ever known, had destroyed the girl she used to be. But Ryan's face appeared in her mind, pale and hopeful in his hospital bed. She needed this job. Losing it was not an option, not when she was 3 months away from impossible and her brother's life hung in the balance. With a deep, shaky breath that she tried to hide, Elena nodded. Excellent. Marcus gestured to the chair opposite him. Do not worry, he added, his voice dripping with condescension as she hesitantly sat down. I will go easy on you. David and Sarah pulled their chairs closer, settling in like spectators at a gladiatorial match. Elena looked at the board, at the familiar arrangement of black and white soldiers frozen in someone else's game. Her hands were shaking, so she placed them in her lap where no one could see. The pieces were not just wood and ivory to her. They were old friends and bitter enemies. They were the language Victor had taught her, the universe he had shown her, the art form that had consumed her childhood and killed him in the end. The game began as Marcus intended, a spectacle of his own magnanimity. He reset the pieces with swift, practiced movements, the wooden pieces clicking against the board with the confidence of someone who was used to being good at everything he tried. He gestured for Elena to take the white pieces, granting her the symbolic advantage of the first move. The first move is yours. He leaned back in his chair, the posture of a man who expected this to be over quickly. A small advantage for the underdog. Careful, Marcus. David chuckled, already playing the role of the amused friend. She might have a few tricks up that apron. The joke was met with polite, sycophantic laughter. Elena felt her face burn. This was not a chess game. This was theater, and she was the entertainment, the novelty act, the trained monkey brought out to amuse the masters. He was not playing chess. He was playing with her, reducing 16 years of sacrifice and a lifetime of genius to nothing more than a billionaire's party trick. But beneath the humiliation, beneath the fear and the anger, something else stirred. The board called to her. The patterns whispered. The pieces remembered her, even if she had spent 16 years trying to forget them. She took a breath, willing her fingers to stop trembling. She looked at the pieces not as a waitress, but as a commander surveying her army. Her first move was pawn to e4, the king's pawn opening. Solid, classic. The kind of move a beginner might make after reading an instruction manual. It was exactly what he would expect from someone who played a little, a long time ago. Marcus responded instantly, mirroring her move with pawn to e5. He was not even looking at the board now, instead regaling David and Sarah with an anecdote about a hostile takeover in Singapore. And so I told him, your valuation is a fantasy. My offer is reality. He signed the next day. Elena's next move was knight to f3. Standard development, the kind of move found in every beginner's textbook. She was playing from a manual, following the script of adequacy. She needed to lose, or at least appear completely out of her depth. That was the goal. Survive the humiliation, collect her paycheck, go home to Ryan. Marcus countered with knight to c6, still dividing his attention between the board and his story. Your turn, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if she were a child he was indulging. For the next 10 moves, the game unfolded in a predictable, almost tedious pattern. Elena played passively, making safe defensive moves that asked no questions and posed no threats. She deliberately ignored opportunities to seize control of the center. She offered trades of equal pieces, simplifying the game, stripping it of complexity and beauty. It felt like sacrilege. It was like a concert pianist deliberately playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with one finger. Her inner voice was screaming, "The Rui Lopez is open. You could control the center. Why are you letting him dominate the queen side? He is leaving his king's knight completely undefended." Marcus was growing more and more bored. He was winning, of course, but it was a hollow victory. There was no art to it, no struggle, no moment where he had to actually think. He had hoped for a mild diversion, but this was just a chore, a task he had assigned himself that had turned out to be far less interesting than anticipated. You are very methodical, he commented, his tone laced with disappointment. He captured one of her pawns with his bishop, a simple, obvious move that she had accidentally on purpose allowed. You must focus on protecting your pieces. Each one has value, you see. He was lecturing her now, explaining chess as if to a child who had never seen the game before. Sarah Mitchell stifled a yawn. David Chen checked his watch. Mr. Peterson watched from a distance, wringing his hands, just wanting this ordeal to be over before something went wrong. It was Marcus's condescending tone that finally broke her resolve. It was not just his arrogance about his own skill, though that was insufferable enough. It was his utter disrespect for the game itself. He saw the board as another asset to be conquered, another testament to his superiority. He did not see the beauty in a well-executed fork, the quiet power of a passed pawn, the poetry of a forced checkmate in 7 moves. He had just moved his queen to h5, setting up one of the most common checkmate traps for beginners. The scholar's mate, a 4-move sequence that every child who learned chess knew and avoided. He was telegraphing it with all the subtlety of a freight train. He was trying to embarrass her with a novice's trick, treating her like she was stupid, like she had never seen this position before. A flicker of defiance sparked in Elena's eyes. The waitress receded, pushed aside by something older and deeper and far more dangerous. For a heartbeat, the phantom sat in her place. The memory of Victor rose up, so vivid she could almost smell the old leather of his coat, could almost hear his voice rumbling through the words. "The board does not lie, Nora. It shows you who you are. Do not disrespect the board." Marcus was smiling, waiting for her to fall into his clumsy trap. "Think carefully," he said with a smirk, the condescension thick enough to choke on. "One wrong move could be your last." Elena looked at the board. She saw his obvious threat, the checkmate he thought he was going to deliver in 2 moves. But she also saw something else, something 3 moves deeper, 4 moves, 5 moves. She saw a subtle weakness he had created in his haste to show off, a tiny crack in his fortress that would become a gaping chasm if properly exploited. Her hand hovered over her knight. The safe move was obvious. Block the checkmate threat, play defense, continue the charade of mediocrity. It was the move of a beginner, the move of a waitress who played a long time ago. But her fingers closed around a different piece, the humble pawn on g7, standing guard in front of her king. She pushed it forward 1 square, pawn to g6. It was a quiet move, an unassuming move. To David and Sarah, it looked like another random defensive shuffle, the kind of move someone who barely understood the game might make. But to Marcus Sterling, it was a thunderclap. The move did more than just block his immediate threat. It challenged his queen, forcing it to retreat. It prepared to fianchetto her bishop, creating a long, powerful diagonal line of attack that would aim directly at the heart of his position. It was not a beginner's move. It was a move of profound understanding, of someone who saw not just the current position, but the position 5 moves from now, 10 moves from now, the position at the end of the game. It was a counterpunch he never saw coming. Marcus's smile faltered. For the first time all evening, he leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and truly looked at the board. He stared at the simple pawn that had just unraveled his entire attack, that had exposed his cheap trick for what it was. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, at the quiet waitress with the haunted eyes and the steady hands, at the woman who had just played a move that belonged in a grandmaster game, not in a friendly match with an amateur. For the first time in his carefully constructed life, Marcus Sterling felt a sliver of doubt. The game had just begun. The atmosphere in the alcove shifted instantly. The light mocking air thickened with a sudden palpable tension that even the oblivious dinner guests in the main room could feel. It was as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the span of a heartbeat. David and Sarah stopped their quiet chatter, their amusement replaced by confusion. They saw their infallible boss, Marcus Sterling, a man who treated every interaction as a game he was destined to win, staring at a chessboard with an expression they had never seen on his face before. Uncertainty. Marcus analyzed the board, his mind racing through possibilities and patterns. The pawn to g6 was not just a defense. It was an insult. It was a move that said, "Your childish trap is beneath me, and now I will punish you for attempting it." He had been playing checkers, moving pieces without thought, and she had just responded with three-dimensional chess. The realization hit him like cold water. "A lucky move," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He moved his queen back to f3, retreating to a safe square, still maintaining some pressure but clearly rattled. He tried to dismiss it, to write it off as a fluke, as a moment of accidental brilliance from someone who barely understood what she was doing. But his hands were no longer quite as steady as they had been. Elena's turn. The hesitation that had marked her earlier moves was gone, burned away like morning fog under sudden sunlight. The internal battle between the waitress and the master was over. The master had won. Or perhaps more accurately, the waitress had simply stepped aside and allowed the ghost to emerge. She was no longer playing to lose. She was no longer playing to survive. She was playing to play, for the first time in 16 years, for the pure love of the game itself. Her next move was bishop to g7, just as the pawn move had predicted. The bishop now sat like a sniper on the longest diagonal of the board, its gaze fixed across the full length of the position, aimed directly at the heart of Marcus's carefully constructed but fundamentally flawed setup. It was a move of such elegant efficiency that even David, who barely understood chess beyond the basic rules, could feel its power. A murmur went through the small audience that had begun to gather. Sarah leaned over to David, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is happening? I thought he was winning." "I do not know." David's eyes were wide, fixed on the board. "I have never seen him this focused on anything, not even during the Cyberdyne negotiations." Marcus's fortress of arrogance had been built over decades, reinforced by success after success, by the accumulated evidence of his own superiority in every field he entered. But now, brick by brick, it was being dismantled by a woman in a waitress uniform, who had claimed to play only a little, a long time ago. He responded with pawn to d4, seizing the center, trying to wrest back the initiative through sheer aggressive force. It was a powerful move, a confident play, the kind of move a strong player makes when trying to intimidate an opponent. Elena met his aggression with a quiet, devastating calm. She did not respond in the center where he wanted her to fight. Instead, she developed her other knight, a simple, elegant move that continued to build her position without engaging in the direct confrontation he was seeking. She was refusing to fight on his terms. She was creating her own battlefield, move by patient move. The game transformed. The slow, predictable tempo of the opening was replaced by a dizzying exchange of thrusts and parries, attack and counterattack, threat and counter-threat. Marcus, now fully engaged for the first time, launched a blistering assault on her kingside. He threw his knights and bishops forward in a coordinated wave, trying to overwhelm her with brute force and aggressive intentions. He was used to winning by intimidation, in the boardroom and on the chessboard. He expected opponents to crack under pressure, to make mistakes when the threats mounted. But Elena's defense was like water. It yielded where it needed to yield, flowed around obstacles, absorbed every blow without breaking. Her pieces moved in perfect harmony, a coordinated dance of defense and repositioning that spoke of thousands of hours of training, of a mind that had been shaped from childhood to see these patterns as clearly as other people saw their own faces in a mirror. For every piece Marcus moved forward, she created a new, subtle threat on the opposite side of the board. She was a ghost. Her influence felt everywhere but seen nowhere, her threats materializing from positions he had thought were safe. Mr. Peterson watched from his position near the entrance, his anxiety mounting with every move. He could see the storm clouds gathering on Mr. Sterling's face, could feel the shift in the room's energy. This was supposed to be a quick bit of fun, a momentary distraction for a wealthy client. Waitresses were not supposed to challenge titans of industry. The natural order of things was being violated, and he had no idea how to restore it. "This is remarkable." Sarah Mitchell finally understood what she was witnessing. She is not just playing, she is dismantling him. As Elena moved her pieces with that quiet certainty, her mind was not entirely in the present. The board had become a doorway, and with each move, memories pushed through like water through cracks in a dam. She was 8 years old again, sitting in the Moscow Chess Club with its peeling wallpaper and the smell of old tobacco that clung to everything. She could see him as clearly as if he were standing beside her now. Viktor Sokolov, with his gray beard and kind blue eyes, his thick wool coat that had seen better decades, his hands that were gentle despite their size. The memory came unbidden, but welcome. She had been playing a man 3 times her age, a regular at the club who thought it would be amusing to play the little orphan girl who had wandered in from the cold. She had beaten him in 15 moves, precise, efficient, showing no mercy because she did not yet understand that mercy was supposed to be part of the game. The man had been embarrassed, had muttered something about luck, and left quickly. And then Victor had appeared, pulling out the chair across from her with a scraping sound that silenced the small crowd that had gathered. "You see patterns, Detka." His voice had been deep, roughened by decades of Russian winters and cheap cigarettes. "But do you understand them?" She had not known how to answer. She was 8 years old and had been living in the state orphanage for a year, ever since her grandmother died and left her alone with younger brother Ryan. Chess had been her escape, her sanctuary, the one place where being alone did not hurt. Victor had reset the pieces with practiced efficiency. "Play me." That first game he had destroyed her, crushed her completely, methodically, showing her every weakness in her play with the precision of a surgeon. She had cried, frustrated tears that she tried to hide, ashamed of her weakness. But Victor had not mocked her. He had knelt down, his old knees cracking with the effort, until his eyes were level with hers. "Tears are teachers, Detka. They show you care. Now learn why you lost." And so had begun the education that would shape her entire life. Every day after school, she would go to the club. Victor would be waiting. Sometimes they played. More often, he taught. He showed her games from history, explaining not just the moves, but the thinking behind them. He taught her to see the board not as it was, but as it could be 5 moves, 10 moves, 20 moves into the future. But more than chess, he taught her life. When she was 9 and came to the club with bruises from a fight with older boys at the orphanage who had taken Ryan's food, Victor had not just comforted her. He had taught her the French defense, showing her how to absorb pressure and counterattack, how to turn an opponent's aggression into their own weakness. "Patience, Elena." His hands had guided hers across the board, his voice steady and sure. "Storm expends its own energy. You must be the mountain. Stand firm and the storm will pass." When she was 11 and had won her first major tournament, the Under-12 European Championship in Bucharest, Victor had been in the audience. She could still remember scanning the crowd for him after her final victory, seeing his face in the 3rd row, arms crossed, but eyes shining with pride. Afterwards, he had taken her for ice cream, a rare treat. "You begin to see, Detka." He had smiled, a true smile that transformed his stern face. "But only begin. Do not let success make you blind." The training had been intense, sometimes brutal. At 13, Victor had put her in a position that seemed impossible, a position where she was down material with her king exposed. She had wanted to resign after half an hour of searching for a solution. The position seemed hopeless, the kind of endgame that grandmasters would simply abandon. "Never resign until you are certain there is no hope." Victor's voice had boomed through the empty club, making her jump. "Look deeper. The board always holds a secret. You must be worthy of finding it." She had looked for another hour, tears streaming down her face in frustration. And then, finally, she had seen it. A quiet pawn move that looked like nothing, that accomplished nothing, but that in 10 moves would flip the entire position. It was brilliant, subtle, the kind of move that only someone who truly understood the deep structure of chess could find. Victor had nodded, his stern expression softening just slightly. This is genius, not talent. Genius is seeing what others cannot." But chess had not been all he taught her. When she was 12 and began her period, terrified and confused, Victor had been embarrassed, but gentle. He had called his friend Elena Petrova, a woman who ran the bookshop down the street, and she had helped. But Victor had also sat her down afterwards. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you are becoming." His rough hand had patted her shoulder awkwardly. "I am proud too. You are not just chess player, Detka. You are person. Never forget this." He had become the father she had lost, the family she needed. When the orphanage finally allowed it, when Elena was 14 and had earned enough from tournament winnings to afford a small apartment, Victor had helped her fill out the paperwork to become Ryan's legal guardian. He had vouched for her, had promised the authorities he would watch over both of them. She is responsible beyond her years. Victor had stood before the cold bureaucrats in their gray office, his presence filling the room. She will care for her brother better than your institution ever could. And she had. With Victor's help, with his guidance, she had built a small life for herself and Ryan. Not easy, never easy, but theirs. The apartment was tiny, barely more than a single room with a bathroom. But it was home. Victor had brought them furniture from his own apartment, a small table, 2 chairs, blankets for the narrow bed they shared. "You have made family from nothing," he had told her one evening as they sat at that small table. Ryan asleep in the bed across the room, a chessboard between them. This is what matters, not trophies, not titles, this. But then had come the prophecy, the warning that she had not heeded, that had cost her everything. She was 14, sitting in Victor's apartment during a snowstorm that had shut down Moscow. Tea steamed between them, the old samovar hissing gently in the corner. Why did you never try for world championship again? She had asked the question that had been on her mind for months. After 1978, Victor's face had clouded, a rare vulnerability showing through his usual stern exterior. "I was arrogant, Detka. In 1978 World Championship qualifier, I played against Karpov." He paused, his hands wrapping around his tea glass as if seeking warmth. "I had winning position. Should have drawn. Draw was enough to advance to final." "What happened?" "I wanted glory." His voice was soft, almost ashamed. "I pushed for victory I did not need, made reckless move, lost game, lost championship, lost everything I had worked for." Elena had been shocked. Victor making a mistake? Victor, who seemed to see everything, to know everything about chess. "But you learned from it," she had said, trying to comfort him. "Yes, I learned." Victor's eyes had met hers, and in them she saw a pain that had never fully healed. "I learned that chess punishes arrogance, rewards wisdom. I learned that there is difference between playing for beauty and playing for ego." He had reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "This is why I teach you patience, why I show you that quiet move can be more powerful than brilliant sacrifice. Chess is not about proving you are smartest person in room. It is about respecting game itself." Then he had opened a small wooden box and pulled out a chess piece, a knight, carved from ancient ivory. "This was from my 1978 match, the only piece I kept." He placed it in her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Reminder for me, now reminder for you. Play for love of game, not glory. If you must choose between winning and integrity, choose integrity. Always. Promise me, Detka." His voice had been urgent, almost desperate. "Never let pride destroy what you love. Never let desire for victory make you blind to what matters." She had promised. "I will not, Papa Victor." The name had slipped out naturally, and he had not corrected her. "I promise." But promises made in warm apartments during snowstorms can be forgotten in the heat of tournament halls under spotlights. Promises can be broken by 15-year-old girls who have something to prove, who are tired of being called prodigy and want to be called champion. The turning point came around move 30. Marcus, frustrated by Elena's impenetrable defense, made a tiny, almost imperceptible error. He pushed a rook forward 1 square too far, leaving his back rank momentarily vulnerable. To a normal player, it would have been nothing. To Elena, it was everything. She did not hesitate. Her next move was a sacrifice, shocking and brilliant. She offered up her rook to his queen. It sat there on the board like bait in a trap. Marcus froze, staring at the offered piece. He spent 5 full minutes analyzing, sweat forming on his brow. The logic seemed undeniable. If he took the rook, he would be up a full piece. But something felt wrong. His ego won. He took the rook. "A desperate move," he announced. "You have blundered." Elena looked at him with an expression that held centuries of sorrow and wisdom. Then she moved her queen to c1. Check. The combination unfolded like a flower blooming in fast motion. Knight to d3. Check. The bishop on g7, placed so long ago, suddenly revealed its purpose. Queen to g1, checkmate. The word fell like a stone into still water. Silence rippled outward from their table, spreading through the restaurant until even the kitchen noise seemed to dim. Marcus stared at the board, his face pale. David's jaw dropped. Sarah covered her mouth, shock and secret joy warring in her expression. "How?" Marcus whispered. "How's that possible?" Elena did not answer immediately. She was remembering another game, another checkmate, another moment when everything had changed. Budapest, 2008, the World Championship qualifier. She had been 15, sitting across from Gregor Volkov, a Russian grandmaster who had spent the entire tournament needling her, calling her Sokolov's little girl, saying she was talented but weak. The position had been similar. She had been winning. A draw would have qualified her for the World Championship cycle. Victor had told her before the game, "Detka, today draw is victory. Do not be greedy." But Volkov had goaded her. "Afraid to finish me, little girl? You will always be second best, always in someone's shadow." And she had pushed for the flashy checkmate instead of the safe draw, had made the reckless rook move that looked brilliant but left her king exposed, had seen Volkov's eyes light up too late, had felt the horror dawn as she realized her mistake. 3 moves later, she had been checkmated. The crowd's sympathetic murmurs had been worse than silence. Volkov's cruel handshake. "Maybe in another decade, little girl." Victor had appeared beside her, his face ashen. He had not been angry. He had been heartbroken. "Elena, I told you." His voice had been so quiet, so pained. "I am sorry, Papa Victor. I am so sorry." She had been crying, unable to stop. In the hallway outside the tournament room, he had sat heavily on a bench. His hand had gone to his chest, a brief wince that she had been too consumed by her own shame to notice. "Why? You had everything." His voice had been weak, strained. "What did anger get you?" She had not had an answer. She had wanted to hurt Volkov the way he had hurt her with his words. She had wanted to prove she was not weak, not a little girl. She had wanted glory instead of wisdom. "I taught you patience." Victor's hand pressed harder against his chest. "This is why. Chess does not forgive arrogance." But then his expression had softened. "I still love you, Detka. You are still my daughter. We start again tomorrow. You have time." She had believed him, had thought they would have years to start again, to rebuild, to reach for championships with wisdom instead of pride. 1 week later, the phone call had come. Elena had been waiting at the chess club. Victor was never late. Never. "Miss Vanescu, you need to come to hospital immediately." She had run through Moscow's streets, her heart hammering, her mind refusing to accept what she already knew. The hospital corridor had been too bright, too white, too clean for the dirty truth of death. "I am sorry." The doctor's face had been professionally sympathetic. "Massive heart attack. He did not survive. Stress was major contributing factor." She had collapsed. The world had ended. Had actually ended, not metaphorically, not dramatically, but truly and completely. The man who had saved her, who had taught her, who had been her father in every way that mattered, was gone. And it was her fault. His heart could not take it, the doctor had explained. He had been having chest pains for days. "Did you notice?" But she had not noticed. She had been too wrapped in her own shame, too focused on her failure to see that he was dying. At the funeral, she had placed the ivory knight in his casket, the piece he had given her as a reminder. She had broken her promise. She had played for ego instead of love, had chosen glory over wisdom, and it had killed him. "I am sorry, Papa Victor," she had whispered to the still form in the coffin. "I am so sorry." She had left chess that day, had taken 16-year-old Ryan and Victor's small inheritance and moved to America, had changed her name from Vanescu to Cross, burying the phantom under years of service work and survival, had vowed never to play again, never to risk loving something so much that losing it could destroy her. But now, sitting across from Marcus Sterling in an expensive restaurant, having just delivered checkmate, she felt Victor's presence as clearly as if he were standing beside her. "The board does not lie, Detka. It shows you who you are." And what the board showed was that she was still his student, still carrying his lessons, still playing not for ego but for beauty, even after all these years. Before Elena could answer Marcus's question, Mr. Peterson rushed forward. "Cross, you are fired! Get your things and get out!" The familiar panic rose in Elena's chest. The job, Ryan, the medical bills, everything crashing down. "Stay where you are!" Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. He stood, looking at Peterson with cold contempt. "She is not fired. If anyone is fired, it is you. Have security escort Mr. Peterson from the premises." 2 guards appeared and led the sputtering manager away. Marcus turned back to Elena, and for the first time, she saw something like respect in his eyes. "The wager. I lost. Ask your question." Elena had planned to ask about ethics, about arrogance. But after reliving Victor's death in her mind, after feeling the weight of her guilt and grief, only one question mattered. When you look at someone, anyone, do you see a person? Or do you see a use? The question cut through Marcus like a blade. Nobody had ever asked him this. Nobody had ever made him confront the fundamental way he viewed the world. Until tonight, he answered slowly, honestly. "I saw uses. People were pieces on a board to move or remove. My father taught me the world is winners and losers. Winners use, losers get used. I built my empire on that. Never questioned it." He paused, looking at her. "But you just showed me I have been losing all along. Because you did not use your gift to humiliate me. You used it to honor your mentor, to play beautifully. That is what I have never understood. Purpose beyond winning." Sarah Mitchell was crying quietly. David sat stunned. The crowd that had gathered stood in respectful silence. "I am Elena Cross, formerly Vanescu." Elena's voice was steady now. "I was called the Phantom. Now I am just Elena, trying to save my brother, trying to honor my father's memory, trying to remember that chess is about beauty, not ego." Marcus reached for the check he had written, pushing it back toward her. "This is not part of wager, but please take it, not as prize, as apology, and as investment in someone who understands what I am just learning." Elena looked at the check, thought of Ryan in his hospital bed, thought of Victor watching from wherever the dead watch from. This time she took it. "Thank you. My brother thanks you." She paused, then added, "I hope this is beginning, not end, Mr. Sterling. Beginning of you seeing people." Marcus Sterling had been beaten twice, at chess and at life, but in defeat, he had glimpsed something he had never seen before: humanity. And for the first time in his carefully constructed existence, he felt something that might have been hope. The second game was nothing like the first. From the very first move, it was war. The air in the private alcove crackled with an intellectual violence that was more intense than any physical confrontation. The chessboard had become a silent, brutal arena where 2 minds met in combat, where every move carried weight, where nothing was forgiven and nothing was forgotten. Marcus, playing with the white pieces this time, opened with the Queen's Gambit. It was a classic, powerful opening designed to seize control from the first move, to dictate the pace and character of the game. It was a statement: I am in charge. I will determine how this battle unfolds. You will respond to my threats, dance to my tune, play my game. Elena accepted the gambit without hesitation. She took the offered pawn, a move that was both defiant and risky. It steered the game immediately into complex, dangerous territory, where one mistake could be fatal. She was telling him something with that acceptance. Your control is an illusion. I will take what you offer and use it against you. This is not your game. This is our game. They played with a speed and ferocity that left their small audience breathless. David and Sarah, who had initially seen this as an amusing oddity, were now completely captivated. They leaned forward in their chairs, drawn into the battle despite not fully understanding the technical nuances. They did not need to understand the individual moves to feel the intensity of the struggle, to sense that something profound was happening in front of them. Other patrons in the restaurant had begun to notice the strange tableau. The billionaire locked in silent combat with a waitress, the crowd gathering at a respectful distance, the absolute focus of the 2 players who seemed to have forgotten that anyone else existed in the world. The hum of conversation in the main dining room had diminished as more and more people became aware that something unusual was occurring. While Marcus and Elena waged their war across 64 squares, a different kind of battle was being fought on the glowing screens of smartphones throughout the restaurant and beyond. David Chen, unable to contribute to the chess game itself, and unwilling to sit idly while his boss was being systematically taken apart, had resorted to the modern executive's primary weapon: information. He had been typing into his phone for the past hour, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. He started with simple searches: Waitress chess, Grand Meridian, Seattle; Elena Cross chess player. The results were non-existent. Her social media footprint was minimal: a private account with a handful of photos showing a young man in a hospital bed, a few pictures of Seattle's gray skyline. Nothing about chess. Nothing about her past. But David was a bloodhound when it came to research. He worked for Marcus Sterling after all, and Marcus only hired the best. David broadened his search parameters, started looking for patterns in the negative space, the gaps where information should be but was not. He began searching for female chess prodigies, child masters who had competed in the last 2 decades. He scrolled through dozens of articles in multiple languages, his eyes scanning for any resemblance to the quiet, intense woman sitting across from his boss. Meanwhile, in the kitchen of the Meridian, Carlos the busboy had recognized an opportunity when he saw one. He had pulled out his phone during his break, started a live stream with a title that was pure clickbait gold: Billionaire Marcus Sterling in Chess Deathmatch with Mystery Waitress. He propped the phone up behind a decorative plant that gave a partially obscured but serviceable view of the alcove. And then he watched as the viewer count began to tick upward. 100 viewers, 500, 1,000. The numbers climbed with shocking speed. Carlos's eyes widened as he watched the chat explode with comments. "Who is she? Look at that move! This is insane!" He had stumbled onto something viral, lightning in a bottle, the kind of content that algorithms loved and audiences shared compulsively. By the time the game reached Move 20, Carlos's stream had 50,000 viewers. The video quality was poor, the angle was bad, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the raw drama of the scene, the David and Goliath narrative, the mystery of the unknown woman who was holding her own against one of the most powerful men in American business. Screenshots from the stream had begun circulating on social media, making their way onto Reddit and chess forums and Twitter threads. The online chess community, always hungry for drama and always analyzing positions, descended on the images like hawks on prey. On one popular chess subreddit, a user with the handle Grandmaster Grind posted a blurry screenshot of the board position from Carlos's stream. Anyone recognize this style of play? The sacrifice she made earlier, the way she is handling the kingside pressure now. It is incredibly familiar. There is something about the creativity, the willingness to accept material disadvantage for positional compensation. I have seen this before, but I cannot place it. Within minutes, responses began flooding in from around the world. It was 3 a.m. in Germany, but chess players kept strange hours, and the internet never slept. A user with a German flag in their profile picture replied, "This reminds me of Sokolov's school. Very aggressive, but deeply positional. The old Soviet style, but with something extra. A creative spark that most of his students never achieved." Another user chimed in, their comment carrying a note of excitement. "I have only ever seen one player who combined that style with this level of tactical creativity. Do you remember the Phantom of Bucharest? Elena Vanescu? She played like this before she vanished after that disastrous loss at the 2008 qualifiers." The thread exploded. "The Phantom? You mean the prodigy who disappeared? She would be, what, late 20s now? It cannot be her. She has been gone for over 15 years. No chess activity at all since Sokolov died." Someone posted a link to an old YouTube video, grainy footage from a European news broadcast. The title was in Romanian, but the images were clear enough. A 15-year-old girl with dark hair and intense eyes, sitting across from a Russian grandmaster, the tournament hall electric with tension. The commentator's voice rose with excitement, even though most of the Reddit users could not understand the words. They did not need translation to feel the drama, to see the brilliance in the young girl's play. "I just watched her lose that final game," one user wrote. "The one against Volkov. She had a winning position. Should have drawn for the qualification spot. But she pushed too hard and got checkmated. You could see her heart break in real time. It was brutal to watch. David Chen, still scrolling through search results on his own phone, stumbled onto the same Reddit thread. His eyes widened as he read through the comments, as he clicked on the YouTube video and watched the young Elena play. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same intense focus, the same way of tilting her head slightly when she was calculating a complex sequence, the same slender fingers that moved across the pieces with such precision. His phone buzzed with the notification. It was from a contact at a private intelligence firm that David kept on retainer for exactly these kinds of situations. The message was brief but comprehensive. Vanescu, Elena, born Bucharest, Romania, 1996. Orphaned age 7, mother died in childbirth, father abandoned family. Raised by maternal grandmother until her death. Placed in state orphanage with younger brother Ryan, currently age 19. Mentored by Viktor Sokolov, former world champion, from age 8 until his death in 2008. Known as the Phantom of Bucharest in chess circles. Immigrated to United States in 2009. Changed surname to Cross. Brother has autoimmune disorder, extensive medical debts, no competitive chess activity since 2008, currently employed as server at multiple establishments in Seattle area. David felt a chill run down his spine. He looked up from his phone to the woman at the board, the timid waitress who served water and wine and made herself invisible. The forgotten prodigy, the phantom who had walked away from chess and buried herself in survival. He looked at the board, at the position that was developing, at the way she was playing, and understood that he was witnessing something rare. A master returning to her art after years in exile. Back at the board, the game had reached a critical juncture. Marcus was fighting for his life, throwing everything he had at Elena's position, trying to create complications that might let him escape the subtle bind she had been tightening move by move. His knights and bishops danced across the board, creating threats that looked dangerous, that forced her to respond that seemed to be pushing her back. But Elena's defense was masterful. For every threat Marcus created, she had an answer that was both efficient and elegant. Her pieces worked together with the kind of harmony that only came from profound understanding, from seeing the board not as a collection of individual pieces, but as a unified whole. An organism that lived and breathed and moved with purpose. The position reminded her of another game, another battle where she had been pressed but not broken. She was 12 years old, playing in a tournament in Prague. Her opponent had been a man in his 40s, a strong club player who had not expected much resistance from a child. He had launched a vicious attack against her kingside, sacrificing pawns to open lines, bringing his heavy pieces to bear with obvious threats. Victor had been in the audience that day. She could still see him if she closed her eyes, sitting in the third row with his arms crossed, his face impassive. But she had learned to read the tiny tells in his expression. The slight crinkle around his eyes that meant he was pleased. The way his fingers tapped against his arm when he saw that she was handling the pressure correctly. That game in Prague, she had absorbed the attack, had given ground where it did not matter, and held firm where it did. And then, when her opponent had overextended, when his pieces were scattered and his king had wandered too far from safety, she had counterattacked. The game had ended in a checkmate so sudden and beautiful that the audience had applauded. After the game, Victor had taken her aside. "You did not panic, Detka. When storm came, you were mountain. This is what I teach you. Not to play pretty moves, to understand that sometimes strength is in bending, not breaking." Now, facing Marcus Sterling's aggressive onslaught, Elena was the mountain again. She bent but did not break. She gave ground but did not surrender. And with each exchange, with each simplification, the position clarified and her advantage grew more obvious. Around move 35, Marcus made his mistake. It was subtle, barely visible even to a strong player. He moved his queen to an active square, creating a threat that looked powerful, that seemed to put Elena under immediate pressure. But in doing so, he had moved the queen one square further from his own king than was safe. The piece that had been guarding his back rank was now too far away to return quickly when needed. Elena saw it immediately, saw not just the current weakness, but the entire sequence that would follow. The moves branching out like a tree, each variation leading to the same inevitable conclusion. Her response was quiet, deceptively simple. She advanced a pawn, a humble foot soldier, creating a passed pawn that would become unstoppable. Marcus frowned, studying the position. The pawn looked annoying but not immediately dangerous. He had time to deal with it. Or so he thought. He continued his attack, moving a rook to a threatening square, trying to maintain the initiative through sheer aggression. But Elena's next move changed everything. She moved her queen to a square that simultaneously defended against his threat and prepared to support her passed pawn's advance. It was a move of such economy, accomplishing so many purposes at once, that even Marcus, focused on his own plans, felt a flicker of unease. The game had reached its crescendo. Both players were deep in thought between moves, the pieces on the board positioned like dancers, frozen in the moment before the music reaches its climax. The audience, now numbering close to 40 people from the restaurant and hotel staff who had heard about the game and come to watch, stood in hushed silence. Sarah Mitchell found herself barely breathing. She had worked for Marcus Sterling for 8 years, had seen him negotiate billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, had watched him dismantle competitors and charm investors with equal ease. But she had never seen him like this, uncertain, struggling, meeting someone who was his equal or possibly his superior. And she found herself hoping that he would lose, not out of malice, though there had been times when his casual cruelty had made her fantasize about his downfall, but because she sensed that this loss might teach him something that victory never could, that there were things more important than winning, that seeing people as people rather than pieces to be moved might actually make him better, not weaker. David Chen stood beside her, his phone clutched in his hand, Marcus's true identity still undisclosed, the truth burning in his pocket like a hot coal. He knew he should tell Marcus, should interrupt the game and show him the research, explain that he was not playing a waitress, but a legend. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the intensity of the moment. Maybe it was curiosity about whether Marcus would figure it out himself. Maybe it was the sense that this revelation should come at the right time, in the right way. Maria Gonzalez had emerged from the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. She stood at the back of the crowd, her weathered hands clasped in front of her chest, watching her friend Elena reveal herself to the world. Maria had always known there was more to the quiet girl who worked too many hours and never complained, had seen the intelligence in her eyes, the grace in her movements, the way she calculated things without seeming to try. But this was revelation. Carlos's live stream had reached 150,000 viewers. The chat was moving so fast it was illegible, a blur of comments and speculation and excitement. Chess streamers with larger audiences had started reacting to his stream, adding their own commentary, analyzing the position, marveling at the quality of play. The mysterious waitress was about to become an internet sensation, whether she wanted to be or not. Marcus moved his rook, trying to create complications, but Elena's response was calm and devastating. She pushed her passed pawn forward another square. It was now only 3 squares from promotion, and Marcus suddenly realized that stopping it would require sacrificing material. His position was crumbling. He tried to create counterplay, moving his queen to threaten her king, but Elena had seen this coming many moves ago. Her king simply stepped to safety, and now Marcus had to deal with the passed pawn that was about to become a queen. He sacrificed a knight to stop it, desperately trying to create some compensation for the material he was losing. But it was not enough. Elena's technique in the endgame was flawless. She simplified the position methodically, trading pieces when it favored her, avoiding trades when they would give him hope. Move by move, she tightened the noose until Marcus's king was trapped in a mating net. The final position was beautiful in its clarity. Elena's queen and rook worked together to control all the squares around Marcus's king. His own pieces blocked his escape routes. There was no defense, no tactical trick that could save him, no brilliant sacrifice that could turn the tables. Elena moved her queen to the final square. Checkmate. For the second time that evening, silence descended on the alcove, but this silence was different from the first. This was not the silence of shock. This was the silence of witnesses to something profound. People who recognized that they had seen something rare and precious, a moment when the world had revealed one of its hidden masters. Marcus stared at the board for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He stood up and extended his hand across the board, not in the perfunctory gesture of a tournament handshake, but with genuine respect. "That was beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you for showing me what chess can be." Elena took his hand, feeling the tremor in his fingers, seeing the genuine emotion in his eyes. Something had shifted in Marcus Sterling. The arrogant billionaire who had challenged her to amuse himself was gone. In his place was someone humbled, someone who had been given a glimpse of a world he had not known existed. The crowd erupted in applause. It started softly, almost hesitantly, then grew louder and more enthusiastic. People were clapping not just for the game, but for what it represented. For skill recognized, for dignity preserved, for beauty created in an unexpected place. David Chen chose this moment to step forward. He placed his phone on the table where both Marcus and Elena could see it. The screen showed the old YouTube video of 15-year-old Elena Vanescu, frozen on a frame that captured her face in profile, eyes locked on the board. "Marcus," David said quietly, "you need to see this." Marcus looked at the screen, then at Elena, then back at the screen. The recognition dawned slowly, like sunrise. The same intense eyes, the same way of holding her head, the same presence that made the space around her feel charged with potential. "Elena Vanescu." Marcus spoke the name carefully, testing it. "The Phantom of Bucharest." The crowd gasped. Those who knew chess history immediately understood. The child prodigy who had vanished. The girl who had been destined for greatness until tragedy struck. Standing in front of them in a waitress uniform, having just delivered 2 crushing defeats to one of the most powerful men in the city. Elena felt the walls closing in. This was what she had feared, what she had avoided for 16 years. The attention, the questions, the inevitable comparisons to who she had been and who she had become. The Phantom was supposed to stay buried. That girl was supposed to be dead. But then she felt something unexpected: relief. The secret had been exhausting to carry. The constant vigilance required to hide who she was, to pretend she did not see the patterns everywhere, to act as if the most beautiful language she had ever learned was just something she did a long time ago. Maybe it was time to stop running from her past. "I was Elena Vanescu," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion churning inside her. "Now I am Elena Cross. I was the Phantom. Now I am just someone trying to save her brother, trying to honor her mentor's memory, trying to remember that chess is about beauty, not ego." Marcus stood very still, processing this information. He had challenged a legend to amuse himself, had treated her like entertainment, had offered her money as if her gift was something that could be bought and sold. The full weight of his behavior crashed down on him. "I am sorry," he said, and he meant it more than he had meant anything in a very long time. "I did not see you. I saw a waitress, a nobody, someone to use for my entertainment." He paused, struggling with the unfamiliar act of genuine apology. "You were right to ask if I see people or uses. I have been blind my entire life." Sarah Mitchell felt tears running down her face. In 8 years, she had never heard Marcus Sterling apologize for anything, had never seen him admit he was wrong. This moment, more than the chess games themselves, told her that something fundamental had shifted. Elena looked at Marcus and saw not the arrogant billionaire who had humiliated her, but a man struggling to understand something new, someone taking his first awkward steps toward becoming better. Victor had taught her that the most important victories were not on the chessboard, but in the heart. And right now, watching Marcus Sterling grapple with his own limitations, she was witnessing a kind of victory that mattered more than any checkmate. "Your father," Marcus continued. "Viktor Sokolov, I read about him after our first game. He taught you that chess is a language, that it shows us who we are. He taught you patience, wisdom, respect for the game itself. He gave you not just skill, but character." Marcus paused, his voice catching slightly. "My father taught me that people are assets or liabilities, that winning is everything, that showing kindness is weakness. He turned me into someone who could build an empire, but who never learned to see the humans in front of me." He gestured to the board, to the pieces that had been their battlefield. "You played beautifully tonight. Not because you wanted to crush me, but because you wanted to honor your teacher. That is what I never understood. Purpose beyond victory. The crowd watched this exchange with the fascination of people witnessing something intimate and profound. Carlos's live stream was being watched by 200,000 people now, the comments section exploding with reactions. Chess grandmasters who had logged on to critique the moves found themselves unexpectedly moved by the human drama playing out. Elena reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small object. It was the ivory knight that Ryan had given back to her, the piece from Victor's 1978 championship match. She placed it on the table between them. "This belonged to my mentor," she said softly. "He gave it to me as a reminder. Play for love of the game, not for glory. Choose integrity over victory. I broke that promise once and it cost me everything." She looked directly at Marcus. "You asked who I am. This is who I am. Someone who learned that lesson too late but is trying to live by it now." Marcus picked up the knight, feeling the smooth ivory, the weight of decades, the history embedded in the carved piece. He understood that he was being given a gift, a lesson, a chance to become something more than what his father had made him. "Thank you," he said, handing the knight back to her carefully. "For the games, for the question, for not giving up on me when I did not deserve your patience." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the check he had written earlier, the one for $250,000 that Elena had refused. "This is not part of our wager, but please take it, not as payment for your chess skill, as an apology for my blindness, and as help for your brother." Elena looked at the check, thought of Ryan waiting for treatment, thought of Victor watching from wherever the dead watch from. She took it, folding it carefully. "Thank you. My brother thanks you. But this cannot be the end, Mr. Sterling. This has to be a beginning. A beginning of you seeing people, really seeing them." Marcus nodded slowly. "I do not know how to do that yet, but I want to learn." Maria Gonzalez pushed through the crowd and wrapped her arms around Elena. "Mija, I knew you were special. But this..." Tears streamed down her weathered face. "Victor would be so proud." Elena hugged her back, feeling the comfort of female solidarity, of being seen not just for her skill, but for her humanity. Sarah Mitchell joined them, and suddenly it was 3 women embracing, while the men stood awkwardly watching, not quite understanding, but feeling the importance of the moment. The crowd began to disperse, people returning to their meals or their jobs, carrying with them the story they would tell for years, the night the Phantom returned, the night a billionaire learned to see, the night everything changed in the quiet alcove of a 5-star restaurant. But for Elena, standing in the place where she had been invisible just hours ago, now seen by everyone, the story was just beginning. The ghost of Viktor Sokolov could finally rest. The promise she had broken could finally be redeemed. And the girl who had died 16 years ago in a Budapest tournament hall could finally be laid to rest, making room for the woman Elena Cross had become. The Phantom was gone, but something better had taken her place. Someone who understood that true strength was not in the pieces you captured, but in the lives you touched. Not in the games you won, but in the grace you showed in both victory and defeat. Not in being the best, but in helping others discover their own potential. As Elena walked out of the Meridian Hotel that night, the check secure in her pocket, Maria's arm linked through hers, she felt something she had not felt in 16 years. Hope. Not just for Ryan's recovery, but for herself. For the possibility that the past did not have to define her, that she could be both the Phantom and Elena Cross, that she could honor Victor by living, not by hiding. Above them, the Seattle sky was dark and starless, clouds obscuring whatever light the universe might have offered. But inside Elena's chest, something bright was blooming, something that felt like forgiveness, something that felt like coming home. The morning after the chess games, Elena Cross stood in the marble lobby of Pacific National Bank, holding a check for $250,000 in her trembling hands. The security guard had looked at her twice when she entered, his eyes taking in her worn coat and secondhand boots, clearly wondering if she belonged in this temple of wealth. But the check in her hands was real, the signature of Marcus Sterling unmistakable in its sharp, angular authority. The teller was a young woman in her 20s, her makeup perfect, her smile professionally pleasant. She took the check from Elena, and her expression shifted through a rapid sequence of emotions: skepticism, surprise, confusion. She held the check up to the light as if checking for forgery, then typed something into her computer, then looked at Elena with new eyes. "Ma'am, I need to verify this with my manager." The teller's voice had lost its automatic cheerfulness, replaced by something more careful, more respectful. "This is a significant amount." Elena waited while the teller disappeared into a back office. Through the glass walls, she could see an older man in a suit examining the check, making a phone call, nodding seriously. 5 minutes passed. 10. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. What if Marcus had changed his mind? What if he had called the bank and stopped payment? What if this was all a dream that would evaporate in the harsh light of morning? But then the manager emerged, all smiles and deference. "Miss Cross, welcome to Pacific National. We would be honored to open an account for you. Would you like to speak with one of our financial advisors about investment options?" "No, thank you." Elena's voice was steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "I know exactly what this is for." The money was deposited. The account was opened. Elena walked out of the bank with a receipt that proved the impossible had become real. $250,000. Enough for Ryan's treatment in Switzerland. Enough for 3 years of rent paid in advance. Enough to breathe for the first time in as long as she could remember. Her first call was to the clinic in Zurich. She stood on the sidewalk outside the bank, her phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face as she spoke to the intake coordinator. "Yes, I can confirm the deposit. Ryan Cross, 25 years old, autoimmune disorder requiring experimental treatment. When can he start?" The coordinator's Swiss-accented English was crisp and professional. "We can schedule him for intake next week. The treatment protocol is 6 weeks initially, with follow-up care extending 3 to 6 months depending on response. I will have him there." Elena's voice broke. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After she hung up, she stood on the street for a long moment, people flowing around her like water around a stone. She thought of Victor, wondered if he could see her from wherever the dead watch from. This money had come from chess, from the gift he had given her, from the skills he had spent years teaching her. Maybe this was his final gift. Maybe this was his way of taking care of her even now, 16 years after his heart had stopped beating. Her second call was to Maria. The older woman answered on the first ring, her voice warm with concern. "Mija, how are you? I have been worried all night." "Maria, Ryan can go to Switzerland. The treatment is approved. He can go next week." Maria's sob of joy came through the phone clearly. "Gracias a Dios. This is miracle, mija. This is answer to every prayer I have said. There is something else I need to tell you." Elena took a deep breath. "I am keeping my job at the Meridian." There was a pause. "Mija, you have money now. You do not need to work like this anymore." "I know, but that job, that work, it taught me something. It taught me that invisible people see the most, that dignity does not come from money, that showing up matters." Elena's voice was firm. "I am not running away from who I was. I am integrating all of it. The phantom and the waitress, the genius and the survivor. All of it is me." Maria's voice was thick with emotion. "Victor would be so proud of who you have become." Elena returned to work that evening, walking into the Meridian with her head held differently. Not higher exactly, but steadier. The staff knew what had happened. News traveled fast in the service industry, and a viral live stream had made sure everyone in Seattle knew that their quiet coworker was actually a chess master who had defeated one of the city's most powerful men. Carlos the busboy hugged her when she came through the kitchen door. "Miss Elena, you are famous! My stream got 3 million views. People are asking who you are, where you came from, if you will play more games." "I am just Elena." She smiled at him, touched his shoulder. "Same person I was yesterday, just more honest now." But things were different. Mr. Peterson was gone, fired and escorted from the property. The new manager, a woman in her 40s named Jennifer, treated Elena with respect bordering on reverence. Maria worked beside her with a new lightness, as if a weight had been lifted from both of them. And when Elena served tables, she noticed people looking at her with recognition, with curiosity, with something that approached respect. Meanwhile, in a corner office 40 floors above the city, Marcus Sterling sat at his desk and stared at spreadsheets that refused to make sense. Numbers that usually spoke to him in clear voices were now just marks on a screen. Profit and loss statements that normally commanded his complete attention slid past his eyes without registering. His mind was somewhere else, trapped in an endless loop of replaying the chess games, the checkmates, the question Elena had asked him. Do you see a person or do you see a use? For 3 days, he had been unable to work. Sarah and David had been covering for him in meetings, making excuses, handling decisions that normally required his direct approval. They exchanged worried glances but said nothing, both of them sensing that something profound was happening, that their boss was going through some kind of transformation that could not be rushed. On the 4th day, Marcus stood up from his desk and walked to the glass walls of his office. Below him, the open-plan workspace of Sterling Technologies spread out like a chessboard, cubicles and desks arranged in perfect efficiency. He had designed this space himself, had hired consultants to maximize productivity, had implemented software that tracked every keystroke and measured every moment. He watched David Chen typing furiously, his shoulders hunched, tension visible even from this distance. David, who never left before 8 p.m., who answered emails on weekends, who had canceled his anniversary dinner last month because Marcus had demanded a presentation be ready by morning. How long had David looked like that? How long had Marcus been too blind to notice? He watched Sarah Mitchell in a meeting room, gesturing emphatically while 3 junior analysts nodded and took notes. She was brilliant, maybe more brilliant than him in certain ways, but he had dismissed her strategic insights just days ago. Stick to the numbers, he had said, as if strategy and analysis were separable, as if her opinion mattered less than his. He watched Kenji, a junior analyst barely out of college, eating lunch at his desk for the 3rd day in a row. The young man's face was pale with exhaustion, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleep was a luxury he could not afford. What was Kenji's story? Did he have family, dreams, struggles that Marcus had never bothered to learn about? For 42 years, Marcus Sterling had looked at people and seen functions, resources to be utilized, assets to be leveraged, competition to be defeated. He had built an empire on this worldview, had accumulated wealth and power beyond most people's wildest dreams, and in the process, he had never once actually seen another human being. Until a waitress had checkmated him twice and asked him a question that shattered everything. Marcus left his office, something he almost never did in the middle of the day. He took the elevator down to the main floor, walked through the workspace. People looked up as he passed, surprised, nervous. The CEO walking among them was unusual enough to cause whispers. He stopped at Kenji's desk. The young man looked up, terror flashing across his face. Kenji thought he was about to be fired. That was the only reason the CEO would come to your desk personally. Kenji, when did you last take a day off? The question seemed to confuse the analyst. I'm not sure, sir. Maybe 3 weeks ago? Take tomorrow off. Marcus heard himself saying words that his father would have considered weak, words that violated every principle he had been taught. In fact, take the rest of this week off. You look exhausted. Kenji's mouth opened and closed, but the Henderson analysis is due Friday. David can finish it. Or it can wait until Monday. The analysis is not more important than your health. Marcus moved on before Kenji could respond. He found Sarah in her office, reviewing documents with the fierce concentration she brought to everything. She looked up as he knocked on her already open door. Sarah, do you have a moment? She gestured to a chair, her expression guarded. What do you need? That is what I need to know. He sat down, and the action itself was unusual enough to make her eyebrows rise. What do you need from me that I have not been giving you? Sarah looked at him for a long moment, clearly trying to determine if this was a trap. Finally, she spoke carefully. I need you to listen when I speak in meetings, to consider my strategic insights as valuable as David's, to stop treating me like I am only capable of managing numbers. You are right. Marcus felt the words stick in his throat, unfamiliar and difficult. I have dismissed you, diminished your contributions, made you feel less valuable than you are. I am sorry. Sarah's eyes widened. In 8 years of working for Marcus Sterling, she had never heard him apologize for anything. Are you feeling well? I am feeling like I have been asleep my entire life and just woke up. Marcus looked at her directly. Elena Cross asked me if I see people or uses. I have been thinking about nothing else for 4 days. And the answer is that I have never seen you. Not really. Not as a person with thoughts and dreams and expertise that rivals my own. I saw a function, a tool, and that was wrong. Tears formed in Sarah's eyes, though she tried to blink them away. She had spent so long being strong, being professional, swallowing her resentment. Hearing this from Marcus, hearing genuine remorse and recognition, cracked something inside her. "Thank you," she managed to say. "That means more than you know." "There is something else." Marcus leaned forward. "I want to promote you, not to reward you for putting up with me, but because you deserve it. President of Operations. You will have equal authority with me on strategic decisions. No more being told to stick to numbers." Sarah's hand went to her mouth. "Marcus, She stopped, composed herself. "I accept. On one condition." "Name it." "David Chen gets the same respect. He has been working himself to death for you, sacrificing his family, his health. He deserves better, too." Marcus nodded slowly. "You are absolutely right. I will speak with him." Marcus left her office and returned to his own, but he did not sit back down at his desk. Instead, he called David Chen up. When David arrived, nervous and uncertain, Marcus gestured to the chair Sarah had occupied an hour earlier. "David, sit, please." David sat, his expression guarded. "Am I in trouble?" "No, you are not in trouble." Marcus took a breath. "How long have you worked for me?" 8 years. 8 years. "And in that time, have I ever asked you about your wife, your children, your life outside this office?" David's face showed surprise. "No, sir." "Her name is Jennifer," Marcus said. David's expression shifted to shock. Marcus continued, "Your children are Emma, age 6, and Michael, age 4. Emma loves ballet. Michael loves dinosaurs. You missed Emma's ballet recital 3 months ago because I needed you for a presentation. You missed your anniversary dinner because I could not wait until morning. I have taken and taken from you, and I have never once asked what it cost you." "How do you know all that?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "I asked my assistant to find out, because I realized I have been stealing your life while pretending I was giving you a career." Marcus met his eyes. "I am sorry, truly sorry, and I want to make it right." "What does that mean?" "It means starting now, no emails after 6 p.m., unless it is genuinely urgent. No weekend work unless you volunteer. No more choosing between your family and your job. And it means a 50% raise, effective immediately, because you have been worth far more than I have been paying you." David's eyes filled with tears. I do not know what to say." "Say you will stay. Say you will help me build a company that sees its people as people, not as resources to be consumed. Say you will teach me how to be better." David nodded, unable to speak. The two men sat in silence for a moment, and something shifted in that office. Something old and cruel died, and something new and tentatively hopeful was born. Marcus made a decision. He called Sarah back to his office. When she arrived, he was standing by the window, looking out over the city. "I need to do something." He turned to face her. "Something that matters more than profit margins and market share." Elena Vanescu's mentor believed that gifts should be shared, that being the best at something is meaningless if you are the worst kind of person. I want to honor that philosophy. "What did you have in mind?" "An academy. For children who would never otherwise have access to chess instruction. Funded completely, free tuition, focusing on kids from working-class families. Named after Viktor Sokolov. Run by Elena, if she will agree." Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to something that might have been pride. "That is beautiful, Marcus. How can I help?" "I need to find the right building. In a neighborhood where it will matter most. Not downtown where rich kids will find it. Somewhere real. Somewhere Victor would have approved of." 3 days later, Marcus stood in front of a building in Georgetown, one of Seattle's historically working-class neighborhoods. The structure was old, a former community center that had been closed for 5 years due to budget cuts. It needed work, needed love, but it had good bones. High ceilings with original wooden beams, large windows that let in natural light, a corner lot with space for a small garden. The real estate agent was listing off problems, trying to manage expectations. "It needs a new roof. The plumbing is original from 1960. The electrical system is not up to code." But Marcus was not listening to the problems. He was seeing the possibilities. The main room could hold 20 chess tables easily. The side rooms could be converted to classrooms. The basement could be storage for equipment and books. This building could be transformed into something that mattered. He made an offer that afternoon, full asking price cash, closing in 2 weeks. The seller accepted before the sun set. Then came the renovations. Marcus hired contractors, but this time he paid attention to who they were as people. He learned that the foreman, Miguel, had 3 children and coached youth soccer on weekends. He learned that the electrician, Linda, was studying for her master's license while working full-time. He learned that the painter, James, was a recovering addict who was grateful for the chance to work on something positive, and he worked alongside them. He showed up in jeans and work boots instead of suits. He painted walls, he sanded floors. He listened to their stories, asked about their lives, saw them not as labor, but as people with dreams and struggles and wisdom he had never bothered to access. Sarah came to the site one Saturday, shocked to find her boss covered in paint, laughing at something Miguel had said. She pulled out her phone and took a picture, not to mock him, but because she wanted to remember this moment, proof that people could change. She rolled up her sleeves and joined him, spending the afternoon painting walls alongside the man who had once treated her like a calculator with legs. David brought his children one Sunday, letting Emma and Michael help plant flowers in the garden beds Maria had planned. Michael asked Marcus if he knew about Tyrannosaurus Rex, and Marcus spent 20 minutes listening to a 4-year-old explain dinosaurs with complete seriousness and attention. Jennifer, David's wife, watched her husband smile in a way he had not smiled in years. Marcus commissioned a portrait from a local artist, a Latina woman named Isabella, who specialized in large-scale oil paintings. He showed her photographs of Viktor Sokolov, described the man's philosophy, his kindness, his belief that chess was a language of humanity. "Paint him as a guardian," Marcus said, "as someone watching over people with love. That is what he was to Elena. That is what this academy should embody." Isabella worked for 3 weeks, pouring her skill into creating something worthy of Victor's memory. When Marcus saw the finished portrait, 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide, he felt tears prick his eyes. Victor looked stern but kind, his blue eyes seeming to hold wisdom and warmth in equal measure. It was perfect. The portrait was mounted in the main hall, a place of honor where everyone entering the academy would see it first. Below it, a bronze plaque was installed. Viktor Sokolov, 1937 to 2008. Teacher, champion, guardian, chess's language, speak with love. 3 weeks after the chess games, Marcus sent Elena a message. Simple, respectful. "I have something to show you. Will you come?" Elena was hesitant. She had been processing everything that had happened, settling into a new equilibrium where she was no longer hiding but not quite sure what being visible meant. But curiosity won, and she agreed. The car that picked her up was the same sleek black vehicle from before, but this time the driver got out and opened her door with a warm greeting. "Miss Cross, Mr. Sterling is very much looking forward to seeing you." They drove to Georgetown, and Elena looked out the window at the neighborhood she had occasionally walked through. Working-class families, small houses with neat yards, corner stores with signs in Spanish and Vietnamese. This was not where she had expected Marcus Sterling to take her. The car pulled up in front of a building that looked different from its neighbors. Freshly painted, new windows, a garden plot being prepared in the side yard. And above the door, a sign, "The Sokolov Chess Academy." Elena's breath caught. She got out of the car slowly, staring at the sign, at the building, at the impossible thing that stood before her. Marcus appeared in the doorway, but he did not speak. He simply held the door open, inviting her to enter. She stepped inside and stopped. The main hall was beautiful. Wooden floors gleamed, windows sparkled, and there, on the wall in a place of honor, hung Victor's portrait. His kind eyes seemed to look directly at her, and for a moment she could swear she heard his voice. "Detka, you are home." "How?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. She walked closer to the portrait, her hand rising to touch the plaque below it. "How did you do this?" Marcus came to stand beside her, but he kept a respectful distance. "I read about Victor, about his philosophy, about what he taught you. He believed that gifts should be shared, that being the best is meaningless if you do not lift others up. He was right." He looked at Elena. "I have spent my life being the best at accumulating wealth and power, and it has made me hollow. blind, cruel without even knowing I was being cruel. He gestured around the space. This building is yours. The foundation is established, funded in perpetuity. Staff salaries, equipment, travel for tournaments, everything you will need. All I ask is that you run it, that you teach, that you create a new generation of players who see chess the way Victor taught you to see it, as language, as connection, as beauty. Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she looked from Victor's portrait to the empty space that was full of possibility. I cannot do this alone. You will not be alone. Maria has already agreed to help. She will be co-director if you want her. Sarah wants to volunteer to teach business skills to older students. David wants to organize corporate sponsorships. Marcus paused. And I want to learn from you, from the students. I want to understand what I have been missing my entire life. Elena walked through the rooms, seeing how carefully everything had been thought out. The tables were different heights for different age groups. The bookshelves were installed at levels children could reach. The windows had cushioned seating where people could sit and study games. This was not just a chess club. This was a sanctuary, a place where people would be seen and valued, where invisible children would be given visibility. She turned to Marcus. Why? Why are you doing this? Because you asked me if I see people or uses. Marcus's voice was raw with honesty. Because I lost to you twice and learned more from those losses than from any victory I ever had. Because Viktor Sokolov died never knowing how much his philosophy would matter to someone like me. And I want to honor him by trying to live it. Because I am 42 years old and just now learning how to be human, and I need help. Elena walked back to Victor's portrait. She stood before it for a long moment, silent, communing with a memory that lived in her heart. Then she turned to Marcus. Yes, I will do it, but not for you, for Victor, for Ryan, for Maria, for every invisible person who was told they did not matter, for everyone who needs to know that their mind is valuable, that their potential is limitless, that their worth is inherent. Marcus extended his hand. Partners then, not boss and employee, partners in something that matters. Elena took his hand. Partners. But I need you to understand something. This academy is not about creating champions. It is about creating good humans who happen to play chess. If you want trophy winners, hire someone else. I want what Victor wanted. Marcus's grip was firm but not aggressive. I want to create a place where people learn to see each other, where strength is defined by character, not by domination, where winning matters less than how you play. They shook hands in front of Victor's portrait, surrounded by empty tables that would soon be filled with students, with dreams, with the sound of pieces moving across boards, and the quiet conversations that chess enables. Outside, Seattle's gray afternoon light filtered through the clouds. Not quite sunshine, but not complete darkness either. Something in between, something like hope. And in that moment, Elena felt Victor's presence more clearly than she had since his death. Felt his approval like a hand on her shoulder, heard his voice in her heart. Well done, Detka. You have taken your broken pieces and created something beautiful. This is what I always wanted for you. Not championships, not fame. This, purpose, connection, love. The academy would open in 6 weeks. There was so much to do, so many details to manage, so many students to recruit. But for now, Elena simply stood in the empty hall and breathed in the smell of fresh paint and possibility, breathed out the fear and the hiding and the years of being invisible, breathed into a future where she could be all of herself at once, the phantom and the waitress, the genius and the survivor, the student and the teacher, all of it woven together into someone who was finally free. The morning of the academy's opening arrived with September sunshine breaking through Seattle's usual clouds, as if even the weather understood this day mattered. Elena stood in the main hall of the Sokolov Chess Academy at 6 in the morning, hours before the doors would officially open, and felt Victor's presence so strongly, she turned to look behind her, half expecting to see him standing there, with his arms crossed, and that stern expression that hid so much love. The tables were ready, 20 of them arranged throughout the space, each one with a full set of pieces and a clock. The books lined the shelves in perfect order. Everything from beginner primers to advanced endgame theory. The windows sparkled with morning light. Victor's portrait watched over everything, his painted eyes seeming to follow her as she walked through the room, checking details for the 100th time. Maria arrived at 7, carrying homemade tamales and a thermos of coffee. She found Elena standing motionless in front of Victor's portrait. "Mija, you have been here all night." Maria's voice carried both concern and understanding. "I could not sleep." Elena turned to face her friend. "What if nobody comes? What if we built this and nobody cares?" Maria set down the food and wrapped her arms around Elena. "They will come. Trust me. They will come." By 8:30, there was a line outside the door. Not a small line. A line that stretched down the block and around the corner. Parents with children ranging from 6 to 16. Faces of every shade. Clothes that ranged from neat but worn to obviously secondhand. These were working people. The invisible people. The ones who cleaned hotels and drove buses and stocked grocery shelves. The ones whose children rarely got chances like this. When Elena opened the doors at 9, she was nearly overwhelmed. The children poured in, some shy, some excited, some trying to look tough while their eyes betrayed their wonder. The parents followed more slowly, many of them looking around with expressions that mixed hope and disbelief, as if afraid that someone would tell them this was a mistake, that this beautiful space with its high ceilings and gleaming floors was not actually for them. Elena stood at the front of the main hall, Maria beside her, and waited for the chaos to settle into something like order. Marcus was there too, standing at the back with Sarah and David, all three of them in casual clothes instead of suits, trying to blend in, trying not to dominate a space that was not about them. "Welcome!" Elena's voice was steady despite the hurricane of emotion swirling inside her chest. "Welcome to the Sokolov Chess Academy. My name is Elena Cross and this is Maria Gonzalez. We are going to teach you chess, but more than that, we are going to show you that your minds are powerful, that your potential is limitless, that you matter." She gestured to Victor's portrait. "That man is Victor Sokolov. He was my teacher, my mentor, my father in all the ways that matter. He taught me that chess is not about being better than other people. It is about understanding, about connection, about creating beauty. He believed that every person has genius inside them, waiting to be discovered. He believed that the greatest victory is not in defeating an opponent, but in helping someone else discover their strength." A small black girl in the front row was staring at Elena with huge eyes, her hand half raised as if she wanted to ask a question but was afraid. Elena smiled at her. "Yes, sweetheart, what is your name?" "Jasmine." The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Is it true you beat a billionaire at chess?" "It is true." Elena knelt down so she was at Jasmine's eye level. "But do you know what I am more proud of? That I learned chess from someone who taught me kindness matters more than winning. That I get to teach students like you. That I get to help you discover how brilliant you are." Jasmine's face transformed, shyness melting into something that looked like hope. "Can you teach me to be brilliant too?" "You already are brilliant." Elena touched the girl's shoulder gently. "I am just going to help you see it." The first lesson was not about chess moves. It was about possibility. Elena had each student introduce themselves, say something they loved and something they dreamed of. Jasmine loved reading and dreamed of becoming a scientist. Miguel, a 12-year-old Latinx boy with anger in his eyes, loved soccer and dreamed of seeing his father again. Aisha, a 10-year-old Somali girl who spoke almost no English, communicated through a translator that she loved music and dreamed of safety. Tommy, a 14-year-old white boy whose clothes smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, loved drawing and dreamed of going to college, even though no one in his family ever had. Each story broke Elena's heart and rebuilt it. Each child was carrying weight that no child should have to carry. Each one was surviving circumstances that would have broken many adults. And each one had shown up here, hungry for something they might not even have words for yet. A chance, a purpose, a place to belong. The actual chess instruction started simply. Elena taught them the names of the pieces, how they moved, the basic rules that govern the game. But she wove in larger lessons. The pawn may seem weak, but it can become a queen if it perseveres. The knight moves in an unusual way, but that makes it special, not wrong. The king must be protected, but it is still just one piece, no more valuable than the person moving it. Maria moved through the room offering encouragement in English and Spanish, her presence maternal and warm. She fixed a boy's grip on a piece, showed a girl how to sit up straighter for better focus, brought water to a child who looked overwhelmed. She had been a server for 20 years, invisible in fancy hotels, and now she was visible, essential, a co-creator of something that mattered. Marcus watched from the back, and something happened to him as he observed. He saw Miguel make an aggressive move, and then immediately regret it, his face showing the internal struggle between pride and wisdom. He saw Jasmine make a careful, thoughtful move, and then look up at Elena with such hope for approval that it made his chest ache. He saw Aisha, who spoke almost no English, communicate clearly through the universal language of the board, making friends across barriers that words could not cross. This was what he had been missing. This was what his father had stolen from him. The knowledge that connection mattered more than conquest, that building people up created something more valuable than tearing them down, that true power came not from domination, but from service. The weeks turned into months. The academy became the beating heart of the Georgetown neighborhood. Jasmine, initially so shy she could barely speak, began to blossom. Elena recognized in her the same pattern recognition gift that she herself possessed, that ability to see the board not as it was, but as it would be several moves in the future. But Elena was careful, so careful not to push too hard, not to let Jasmine's talent become a burden. "You have a gift, Jasmine," Elena told her after the girl had played a particularly beautiful game against an older student. "But gifts are meant to bring joy, not pressure. Play because you love it, not because you think you have to prove something." Miguel, the angry boy whose father had been deported, initially acted out constantly. He knocked pieces over when frustrated, cursed when he lost, tried to intimidate younger students. Elena set a firm boundary. "You respect the board or you leave. This is not a negotiation." Miguel stormed out. Elena let him go, her heart aching, but her resolve firm. He came back the next day. "I am sorry, Miss Elena." His voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "I do not know how to not be angry." "Then let us learn together." Elena sat down with him at an empty board. "Chess will not take away your anger, but it will teach you how to channel it into something constructive. Your father would want you to be strong, yes?" "Yes. Strength is not in breaking things. It is in building them. Show me you are strong enough to build something beautiful." By the third month, Miguel had become one of the academy's most dedicated students. More than that, he had begun helping younger kids, teaching them openings, showing them tactics, offering the same patient guidance that Elena had given him. His anger had not disappeared, but it had transformed into purpose. Aisha, the Somali refugee who arrived speaking almost no English, found that chess was a language she could speak fluently. On the board, she needed no translator. She could communicate complex ideas, show her personality, make friends. By the 6th month, her English had improved dramatically, partly from classes at school, but mostly from the constant conversation at the academy, from the community that had embraced her. Tommy, the boy from the troubled home, had found in the academy the safe space he needed. His mother was an alcoholic, his father long gone, and home was a place of chaos and pain. But here, in this room with its high ceilings and kind people, he could be himself. He could focus on something beautiful. He could forget for a few hours that his life was hard. Elena saw him one evening, after most students had gone home, sitting alone at a board studying a position. She sat down across from him. "What are you working on?" "Endgames." Tommy did not look up. "My teacher said endgames are where you see the truth of chess. No distractions, just pure logic." Your teacher was very wise. Elena recognized the position. Victor had shown her this exact endgame when she was 13. It seemed simple, but contained depths that took years to fully understand. "Do you like it here, Tommy?" He looked up then, and his eyes were wet. "This is the only place that makes sense. Everything else in my life is chaos. But here, everything has rules. Everything has order. Everything has purpose." Elena reached across the board and took his hand. "You have purpose, Tommy, not just here, everywhere. You matter, not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. Tommy broke then, crying the tears of a child who had been holding too much for too long. Elena came around the table and held him while he sobbed. This boy who was trying so hard to be strong, to survive, to find meaning in a world that had shown him mostly cruelty. Marcus Sterling had become a fixture at the academy. Every Saturday morning, he arrived at 9 and stayed until closing at 5. He did not teach chess, recognizing that his own understanding of the game was too shallow, too focused on winning rather than beauty. But he played with the students, losing gracefully, asking them to explain their thinking, treating their insights with the respect he had once reserved only for board members and fellow executives. The children loved him because he listened, really listened. When Jasmine explained a tactical sequence, Marcus asked questions that showed he was genuinely trying to understand, not just waiting for his turn to talk. When Miguel talked about his father, Marcus did not offer empty platitudes, but acknowledged the pain and the complexity. When Tommy showed him drawings of chess positions transformed into abstract art, Marcus asked to buy one, framed it, hung it in his office at Sterling Technologies, where everyone could see it. Sarah and David also became volunteers, teaching business skills and financial literacy to the older students. Sarah, who had spent 8 years being dismissed by Marcus, found joy in being heard by teenagers who hung on her every word. David, who had never had time for anything but work, discovered that teaching brought a satisfaction that profit reports never had. He brought Emma and Michael sometimes, and the sight of his children playing chess with the academy students made him understand what he had been missing all those years. 1 year after the academy opened, on a gray Tuesday morning, Elena received the call she had been simultaneously hoping for and dreading. Ryan was coming home from Switzerland. The treatment had worked. He was in remission. He was healthy. He was coming home. She picked up Maria, and together they drove to SeaTac Airport, both of them too emotional to speak coherently. The students had made a banner, "Welcome home, Ryan," decorated with chess pieces and rainbows and messages in a dozen different handwritings. Elena clutched it like a talisman as they waited at the arrivals gate. And then he was there, Ryan Cross, 25 years old, walking through the gate under his own power, no wheelchair, no visible weakness. Just a young man with color in his cheeks and life in his eyes, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. Elena dropped the banner and ran to him, throwing her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder while he laughed and held her and whispered over and over, "I am okay. I am okay, sis. I am okay." Maria picked up the banner, tears streaming down her face. The other people in the airport smiled at the reunion, these strangers who understood they were witnessing something precious. Love visible, hope realized, life given back. They took Ryan to the academy first, before even going home. Elena wanted him to see what his survival had made possible, what the money from Marcus Sterling had created. Ryan stood in the main hall, students swirling around him, Jasmine showing off a trophy from her first tournament, Miguel introducing himself with newfound confidence, Aisha giving him a drawing she had made of a chess knight transformed into a bird. "This is what you built?" Ryan looked at his sister with wonder. "All of this?" "Not me." Elena put her arm around him. "Victor built it, Marcus funded it, Maria runs it with me. The students make it real every day. I am just the person who gets to show them what I was shown, that they matter, that their minds are valuable, that chess can save your life. You saved my life." Ryan hugged her again, and in that embrace was everything they had survived together. The orphanage, the immigration, the poverty, the medical bills, the years of Elena working herself to exhaustion, the fear that had haunted both of them. All of it finally transformed into something bearable because they had survived it together. 2 weeks after Ryan returned, Elena took him to a small garden behind the academy. It had been Maria's idea, this green space where students could sit and study or just breathe. There were raised beds where they grew vegetables, benches made from reclaimed wood, and a small table with a permanent chessboard. Elena and Ryan sat across from each other as the afternoon sun filtered through the clouds. The board between them was not a battlefield but a conversation, a language they could speak together, a way of being together that required no words. They played slowly, casually, taking time between moves to talk about other things. Ryan told her about Switzerland, the treatments, the kind doctors, the other patients who had become friends. Elena told him about the students, their progress, their stories, the way chess had become a community builder just as Victor had always believed it could be. "I watched your game," Ryan said, moving a knight. "The one against Marcus Sterling, Carlos's video. I watched it maybe 100 times. Why? Because I needed to remember that you are not just my caretaker. You are genius too. You are the Phantom. And you set that part of yourself aside to take care of me." Elena moved her bishop, a quiet defensive move. "I did not set it aside. I integrated it. Being the Phantom was about ego. Being your sister taught me about love. Both parts made me who I am." "You are lighter now." Ryan studied her face, not the board. "Like you put down a weight you did not know you were carrying." "I put down guilt." Elena's voice was soft but clear. "I blamed myself for Victor's death for 16 years. Thought I killed him with my arrogance. But Marcus helped me see that I honored Victor more by teaching than by hiding. That the gift Victor gave me was meant to be passed forward, not buried." They played for another hour, the game drifting into a peaceful draw, neither of them trying to win. Both of them just enjoying the flow of the pieces, the rhythm of the conversation, the miracle of being together, and healthy and alive. 3 years after the academy opened, the space had transformed beyond Elena's wildest dreams. The original building in Georgetown was thriving with 200 students enrolled, and they had opened 2 more locations, one in Rainier Valley and one in Beacon Hill. Every location was full, with waiting lists of families hoping for spots. The students from those first months had grown. Jasmine, now 11, had won the Washington State Scholastic Championship in her age group. But more importantly, she had started a chess club at her elementary school and spent her Saturday afternoons teaching younger children the basics. "I want to be like Miss Elena," she told anyone who asked. "I want to help people see they are brilliant." Miguel, now 15, had become a teaching assistant at the academy. His father had returned from Mexico. The family reunited through the advocacy of a legal aid organization that Sarah had connected them with. Miguel still carried anger, but it had been transformed into passion, into purpose, into fire that warmed rather than burned. He wanted to study education, to open his own academy someday, to create for others what Elena had created for him. Aisha, now 13, spoke fluent English and was helping translate chess instruction materials into Somali to make the game accessible to more refugee families. She played chess competitively, but also used it as a tool for cultural bridge building, organizing games between refugee students and their American-born peers, showing that a chessboard could be a place where all differences melted away. Tommy, now 17, had earned a scholarship to Seattle University. He was going to study art and education, wanted to develop chess-based art therapy programs for at-risk youth. The academy had saved his life, had given him a path out of chaos into purpose, and he wanted to spend his life giving that gift to others. The academy's impact rippled beyond individual students. The Georgetown neighborhood had seen a 20% decrease in youth crime since the academy opened. Elementary and middle schools in the area reported improved critical thinking scores. Families that had never interacted now came together for tournaments and celebrations, building community across lines of language and culture and class. Marcus Sterling had been transformed as thoroughly as any of the students. He still ran Sterling Technologies, still closed deals, and managed portfolios, but his approach had fundamentally changed. He had implemented mental health days for all staff. He had started a profit-sharing program that made even junior employees stakeholders. He had begun asking in meetings not just what would maximize short-term profit, but what would benefit the community, the employees, the world his company operated in. His staff barely recognized him. The man who had once seen them as functions now asked about their families, their struggles, their dreams. The CEO who had driven people to exhaustion now insisted on work-life balance. The billionaire who had measured success only in dollars now measured it in human flourishing. Sarah Mitchell, now president of operations, had become a role model for women in tech, speaking at conferences about leadership and equity. David Chen had found balance, leaving work at 6 to have dinner with Emma and Michael every night, coaching Emma's soccer team on weekends. Both of them continued to volunteer at the academy every week, giving back to the community that had taught them what actually mattered. On a Saturday afternoon, 3 years and 6 months after the academy first opened, Elena was teaching a beginner class in the main hall. The room was full of energy, 40 students ranging from 6 to 12, all of them focused on the boards in front of them, all of them learning not just chess, but patience, logic, creativity, grace. A new family entered, a mother with a young daughter who looked about 8 years old. The girl had dark hair and intense eyes, and when she looked at the chess pieces displayed near the entrance, her face showed a hunger that Elena recognized instantly. It was the same hunger she had felt at that age, the same desperate need to understand, to connect, to find meaning in a world that seemed chaotic and frightening. Elena excused herself from the class and approached the newcomers. "Welcome to the Sokolov Chess Academy. I am Elena Cross." The mother smiled nervously. "This is my daughter Sophia. She has been asking about chess and she saw an article about this place. We are not sure she will like it, but she insisted we come." Elena knelt down so she was at Sophia's eye level, just as she had with Jasmine 3 years ago, just as Victor had with her 28 years ago. "Hi, Sophia. Do you know how to play chess?" "No." Sophia's voice was soft but steady. "But I feel like I should know, like the pieces are calling to me." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Victor had said almost the exact same thing to her after their first game. "The pieces call to some people, Detka. You are one of them. Welcome home. Would you like to learn?" Elena gestured to an empty table in the corner. Sophia nodded eagerly, and Elena led her to the table. They sat down across from each other, and Elena began with the same lesson Victor had taught her. These are not just pieces of wood. They are a language. When we move them, we are speaking to each other. We are showing each other who we are. She showed Sophia how each piece moved, and the girl absorbed it with frightening speed, her eyes tracking the patterns, her small hands already understanding the right way to hold a piece, to place it precisely in the center of a square. By the end of the lesson, she was playing simple games, making moves that showed intuition beyond her experience. "Why did you move your knight there?" Elena asked after Sophia made a particularly sophisticated defensive maneuver. "I do not know." Sophia looked at the board with a slight frown. It felt right, like it was calling to me, like I could hear it asking to go there. Elena's breath caught. Those were almost word for word what she had said to Victor when she was learning. The same gift, the same strange connection to the patterns, the same ability to hear what the pieces needed. She looked up at Victor's portrait on the wall, and for a moment she could swear he smiled. "You have a gift, Sophia." Elena's voice was gentle but serious. "A very special gift, but gifts can be heavy if we do not carry them correctly, so I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you will play for love, not for proving anything. Promise me you will remember that chess is about beauty, not about being better than other people. Promise me you will be kind." Sophia nodded solemnly, sensing that this was important, even if she did not fully understand why. "I promise." "Good." Elena touched the girl's shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility, the torch being passed from one generation to the next. "Then let us continue. Let me show you something beautiful." They played for another hour, and by the time Sophia's mother came to collect her, the girl was glowing. "I love it." She looked up at Elena with absolute trust. "Can I come back?" "You can come back as many times as you want. This is your place now, too." After they left, Elena stood alone in the main hall for a moment. The other students had gone home. Maria was in the office doing paperwork, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor. She walked to Victor's portrait and stood before it, this painted image of the man who had saved her, taught her, loved her, died because she had been too arrogant to listen. "I kept the promise, Papa Victor," she spoke aloud, not caring if anyone heard. "I taught them that chess is language, that beauty matters more than winning, that people are never just pawns to be moved." She paused, tears streaming down her face. "I hope you are proud." And in that moment, as the light shifted and the shadows moved, she heard his voice. Not imagined, not remembered, but heard in her heart with perfect clarity. "I am proud, Detka. You took your broken pieces and created something beautiful. You turned your grief into grace, your guilt into gift. You became teacher I always knew you could be. Not just of chess, of life, of love, of seeing. Elena closed her eyes and felt him there, really there, his hand on her shoulder, his presence wrapping around her like the old wool coat he used to wear. And she understood that he had never really left, that the love between teacher and student transcends death, that every time she taught a child to see beauty in 64 squares, Victor was alive in that moment. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The 8-year-old orphan who found a chess set in an attic, the 15-year-old prodigy who made a fatal mistake, the 16-year-old girl who watched her mentor die, the young woman who immigrated with her brother, buried her identity, the waitress who was challenged by a billionaire, and now, the teacher who had finally found peace. The phantom was gone. The ghost had been laid to rest. In their place stood Elena Cross, whole and healed, carrying all of her identities integrated into one person. The prodigy and the survivor, the student and the teacher, the broken and the mended. All of it woven together into someone who understood that the greatest victory is not in defeating opponents, but in helping them discover their own strength. Marcus appeared in his doorway, his weekly ritual bringing him to the academy even on quiet evenings like this. He saw Elena standing in front of Victor's portrait and started to retreat, not wanting to intrude on a private moment. But Elena gestured for him to enter. "Thank you, Marcus." She turned to face him. "For building this, for changing, for learning to see. Thank you for teaching me how." Marcus looked around the empty hall, at the tables where children learned, at the books where wisdom waited, at the portrait of a man he had never met, but who had changed his life anyway. Victor would be proud. He is. Elena smiled through her tears. I can feel him here. Every day, every lesson, every student who learns that they matter. He is here. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who had started as opponents and become partners, who had learned that the greatest strength is in admitting weakness, that the greatest wisdom is in knowing you do not know, that the greatest victory is in helping others win. Outside, Seattle's afternoon was fading into evening. The lights in the academy began to glow warmly against the gathering darkness. Students would return tomorrow. Sophia would come back for her next lesson. Jasmine would teach her group. Miguel would guide the new students. Aisha would translate. Tommy would create art from chess positions. The work would continue. The community would grow. The legacy would multiply. From Victor to Elena to Sophia to unnamed students in the future, the gift would be passed forward, each generation learning that chess is not about winning but about seeing, not about domination but about connection, not about being the best but about bringing out the best in others. Elena picked up the ivory knight from her pocket, the one Victor had given her so many years ago. She placed it on the table in the main hall, in a small display case that Maria had commissioned. A plaque beneath it read, "Play for love, choose integrity, see people. Viktor Sokolov, 1937 to 2008. The night would stay here, where students could see it, could be reminded of the lessons it represented, where it could serve not as a memorial to the dead, but as an inspiration to the living, where it could speak its truth to every person who entered this space. You matter. Your mind is powerful. Your potential is limitless. Play beautifully. Elena walked out of the academy that evening with Marcus beside her, Maria locking up behind them. The three of them, unlikely partners, stood on the sidewalk and looked back at the building that had become so much more than wood and brick. It had become a sanctuary, a community, a place where invisible people became visible, where broken people became whole, where chess became what Victor had always said it was, a language of love. The waitress was gone. The phantom was healed. In their place stood a queen, finally in command of her own board, playing a new game where every move was a victory. Not because she was winning, but because she was helping others discover that they had always been queens and kings themselves, that their crowns had been waiting for them to notice, that their kingdoms were inside them all along. The board does not lie. It shows you who you are. And what the board showed, what 3 years of teaching had revealed, was that Elena Cross was exactly who Victor had raised her to be. Not a champion, not a prodigy, but something far more important: a teacher, a guardian, a keeper of the flame that lights the way for others. As they walked into the evening, leaving the academy glowing behind them, Elena felt something she had not felt since she was a child sitting across from Victor in that dusty Moscow chess club. She felt complete. The circle was not just closed, it was infinite. It would spiral forward through Sophia and all the Sophias to come, through generation after generation of students who would learn that chess was more than a game. It was a way of seeing, a way of being, a way of loving. And love, as Elena now understood, was the only thing that ever really mattered, the only checkmate worth delivering, the only victory worth winning, the only legacy worth leaving behind.